Hi. First of all, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to say that I'm deeply, deeply honored that you're here. And I want to present myself. So my name is Lucas. I'm an economics student at the
Yeah,
Federal University here at the
yeah,
state of Paraná. I've been coordinating the LGBT initiative within Livres since the beginning of 2020. So, it's been about a year since I've been coordinating that effort, but I've been in Livre since the end of 2017. And the LGBT initiative, we've named the McCloskey Sectorial in your honor,
yay! I got something named after me.
You do.
because we
Well,
feel
that's
that,
wonderful.
yeah, we really identify with the way that you see the match between liberty and
Yeah,
diversity,
yeah,
right?
I think
We
it's
feel
very
that
deep.
it's a holistic philosophy. It's not
Yeah,
just something that's right. It's not just a
that's
series
right.
of rules. And
Yeah, and
we've launched.
liberty is liberty is liberty.
That's right. I really like that line of yours because I feel that we as a movement are in need of a more holistic approach
Yeah,
to liberty. And so we've launched a manifesto in the middle of the year last year, detailing our philosophy and trying to bring that individualistic approach to matters that have to do with our community, right? The LGBT
yeah,
community, but trying to approach that from the individual. We're also very excited because we have this project called the Employability Project. So we want to match LGBT people who are looking for work with workstations. This is
hmm
something that we want to do this year. And I also want to talk about why I asked you here, like why I sent you that email about a month ago, and why I felt it was important for me to talk to you, for us from the sectorial and from Livres to talk to you. I just wish to convey that message that economists can be diverse and that diversity has a place within economics,
yeah,
right? So economists can come from all walks of life. They can be diverse, I don't know, in their sexual identity, expression, their ethnicity.
yep,
But the most important diversity is the diversity of ideas, right?
yes,
So it's not only allowed, it should be encouraged that economists think differently and that there's that diversity, so that there's that debate, right? And I think
hmm
you encompass that very well because you're diverse in so many ways, right?
yes,
So I want to ask you a few. We want to ask you a few economics questions and a few
sure.
diversity questions as well,
Go
if
ahead.
you're okay with that.
I certainly am open to it.
Paulo, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to take a step back and for those of who are watching us and who by any chance don't know Professor McCloskey, she is a very known economist. She has been known for lots of books, especially the trilogy on the virtues of bourgeoisie, and one of my favorites on how to write about economics because tends to be quite an enclosed in a very hermetic language science. And also an old friend of Livres. She has given us the translation rights to one of her works. She
Yeah,
has given us a very, very interesting interview the last time she was in Sao Paulo, which is also on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back there and watch it, you're probably gonna love it. Um,
I did.
it's very. It was a very fun interview, and then we heard that the following days, Professor McCloskey was with using our pin giving interviews. So that
Of
was
course.
quite a big honor for us. So that was it. I just wanted to go back into the introduction for those who just in case don't know Professor McCloskey.
Yeah. Can I start by asking you a question, a very specific question?
You don't have to ask me if you can ask a question. You can
You already
ask the question. Just
Isn't
ask
it?
it, dear. I'm
I
the
I
answer lady. I have answers to all questions about everything except the Portuguese language, which I don't know.
So Brazil has voted recently formal rules for central bank autonomy,
Yeah.
right? And that decision was criticized by many because the critics feel that it gives financial markets power over monetary policy. But most economists have seen that as a step in the right direction. So I wonder what you see the role of a central bank is, and whether Brazil is really in the right direction.
Well, in the old days, when we had lots of capital restrictions and many, many tariffs, and the world was all chopped up into countries, each country's central bank was very, very important because it issued the money supply and that determined inflation. And Brazil, as you know, has a very sad experience with hyperinflation, with extremely high rates of inflation caused by the government going to the central bank and saying, print more money so that we can pay the army or build roads. In the modern world, I think central banks are not as important as they once were, as they were in that era after the Second World War. Now, the financial economy of the world is very international. If Brazil decides to, I don't know, go crazy and have fast inflation, that will be instantly reflected in the exchange rate. And there'll be all kinds of financial things that Brazil cannot do because the international economy is so interlinked. But all that aside, the signal which is sent to the rest of the world when you made the central bank independent is a very good one, because it suggests an adult form of government, a grown-up form of government. Now, I'm not so sure about Bolsonaro, but I am sure that it's desirable to be adult in one's economic policy.
I see.
So it's like growing a beard. It makes you look older.
That's right. By the way, I took mine out yesterday.
There you go.
I actually want to go off of what you said. You mentioned Bolsonaro's name.
Yeah,
I want to ask a question that's a bit.
Don't say you want to ask a question. Ask the question.
Okay, because I was gonna say that it's not controversial, but Bolsonaro has announced last week that he might tamper with Petrobras gas prices.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So this is something that, and we as a country, we have a very bad experience with that. And he has also named a general to the presidency of Petrobras.
I saw that.
And
I saw that in the news.
Right. Since he announced that, Petrobras has lost its value by more than 20%.
Oh yeah, it'll lose more. I advise you to sell Petrobras short, as we say in the financial world. Yeah. Well, Bolsonaro, I don't need to tell Brazilians, is a populist on the order of Donald Trump, and as you know, there's a long history of populism in Latin America, Argentina being the extreme example. But, this idea that this man on the white horse will come in and start messing with things, start appointing generals here and controlling gas here and blah, blah, and do all these things is dangerous. It's not got a happy history in Latin America. It tends to either a fascism of the right, as in Bolsonaro's case, or I don't mean he is a fascist, I mean he tends that way, or a fascism of the left, such as in Venezuela. So that's not good. I don't approve, and I'm sure that Bolsonaro will be very worried that Deirdre McCloskey doesn't approve.
Well, I hope the market is. But anyway, my addition to that is I remember reading Lakoff's work on the morality in politics and talking about like strict father morality and then
Yeah, that's right.
father morality. And
That's
then,
a very interesting book.
It is. It kind of helped open up my view on
Yeah.
sort of not right and left politics, but sort of more heart guided or more order guided politics.
Yeah.
And the U.S. has moved from sort of strict father to cool grandpa, nice everybody. But I wanna ask you, are you concerned of any sort of interventions on the economics or the military aspects of the Biden government? Do you think that, or do you think he's going to be a totally new page as opposed to how Trump guided
on the military? Did you say military?
Economics and military.
And military. Well, yeah, I just listened to a speech of his announcing an executive order to mess with, to use my phrase of a few seconds ago, with supply chains of vital goods, computer chips, biological stuff for vaccines and so forth. And, I said to myself, oh, no, please, because he kept talking in protectionist terms. Now, he's a good man. We all agree on that. Biden is. But he's not, as we say in the United States, he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He's not a heavily intellectual guy. He's not all that smart. He's wise. He's not like the fool we had before. But this idea of protecting things, protecting you against me, and then protecting me against you. Now think about that. Does that make a lot of sense? That we'll all be protected against each other? And that's what protection does. That's what saying, oh, well, we'll make the computer chips, we in the United States or we in Brazil, and that'll be good because then it's putting Americans or Brazilians to work. And that's just a terrible idea. It would be as though you thought that it would be a good idea for you to do everything for yourself. I have a little accordion, one of those accordion that I bought a couple of years ago. I don't practice enough, but still I have it. And it's from Czechoslovakia. Well, would I be better off if I spent my days and nights making an accordion for myself? Of course not. It would be much better to let the Czechs make these excellent accordions. So I'm a little worried. I'm not worried in the extreme socialist way. There's a left wing of the Democratic Party in the United States, which is frankly socialist. I mean, they're not violent and they're not communists, but they are socialists. And I don't think the Biden administration will follow them very much.
Yeah. If I may pick up on that, I don't know if we've lost you.
No, we lost me? I'm right here. Hi. I may be lost, but I'm not lost to you.
Well, I actually want to pick up on that because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I know US congresswoman who's from that left wing wing of the Democratic Party. She has this plan that's based on new money theories, right?
Oh God, yes.
And just sort of seeing it more generally. Since the pandemic, governments around the world have incurred into more deficit, right? So in the US, in 2019, the deficit as a percentage of GDP was about 6%.
Yeah.
And now in 2020, it almost reached 15%.
Yeah.
right? So there's this idea that maybe we'll see economic thought and the economy differently after the pandemic.
Well,
that.
Yeah. Well, I am worried about it. It's not so much the deficit spending, although I don't like that either, but it's the increased control of the economy and the acceptance by Americans and Brazilians and everyone else of more and more scope for the government to say, no, you can't do that. You got to do this. She is a excellent politician. She's very skillful, but she's a fool on economics. She doesn't understand economics at all. And anyone who follows the new monetary economics is not an economist. I don't know what to call them. It's magic. It's magic, very similar to something that President Biden does want. I don't think he's going to get it. An increase in the minimum wage in the United States to $15 an hour. Well, you'd think, well, gee, what's wrong with that? You make poor people better off. But you make very poor people worse off because then they don't have a job at all, right? So you're sacrificing very poor people who are not worth $15 an hour to some employer, so that people around who are now around 12 or $14 an hour, you can improve them. And that's unethical. And then there's something more important, which is, as you mentioned, there's a motherly way of looking at politics and a fatherly way. And the left thinks of itself as motherly, and the right thinks of itself as fatherly. But notice, in both cases, we're the children.
Yeah.
We either have a mama who's taking over our lives or a papa who's taking over our lives. But we liberals, about gender issues and about economic issues and about politics, we don't believe in the parental model of government. We believe that we're the adults. We're grown-ups. That doesn't mean we don't help poor people or we're cruel or something, but it does mean that we treat everyone as though they were an adult. In fact, I've proposed that instead of calling liberalism in both your country and mine, the word has been so corrupted that it doesn't mean much. Instead of calling it that, let's call it adultism. And I think that's the heart of the promise of 18th century thinkers like Voltaire or Thomas Paine, Mary Wollstonecraft. That was their core idea, that you should stop treating people like children and you should give them the dignity of permission.
That's great. I want to pick up a question from the audience, if I may, Lucas, which is from Queiroz, and he or she is, sorry, I can tell by the picture, is asking us how can we make companies and business people include more members of the LGBT community, especially transgender and transvestites, into the workforce?
Well, the one way that you personally can help this cause is to be very good at your job, and that's kind of obvious. If you're queer in some way, but you're very good at whatever it is you do, then the sensible employer is going to say, "Boy, she's pretty good." And I may not like the way she dresses, but she has green hair or something. But she's adding value to my enterprise. So that's one thing. The thing we have to watch out for is to try to use the state, the government, to make people hire us. That's dangerous. I think now this word permission is a very important one. It's not equality of opportunity that we want, it's permission. So in my own country, Trump, among his other foolishness, said that transgendered people could not serve in the military. Now that was crazy, because there'd be some transgendered person who spoke Arabic and was in the Marine Corps and would be a very valuable person to have. So that goes to the working hard and the competence part, but it's also not permitting people. It's this permission point. If we permitted people to go into occupations freely, that whether they could show that they're qualified, not have state licenses for occupations, not prevent people from buying what they want to buy somewhere else or from some other supplier, then we'd have a healthy and growing economy. And that would be the best welfare program for queers. You know, in the Stonewall riots back in New York, which were very important for the ending of terror against gay people, it was the drag queens who fought the police. It was not the muscle men, in their leather outfits. No, they ran away, I think. But the drag queens in their high heels and purses hit the police. And I think that's symbolic. One more thing. Stonewall was a private restaurant, right? A private bar. It was a private enterprise. The force trying to oppress gays there was the state, were the police. So to turn to the state as our good friend, what we should say to the state is, leave us alone, dear. Don't pay for our operations. Don't make laws that we have to be employed. Just leave us alone.
Let us have a go.
You Lucas, do you want to go? Yeah. No, just go ahead and yeah, sure.
Sure, because I have something that's written here, and it relates to that question.
Say it.
There's been a new movement in companies that's called diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
Companies want to signal that they value diversity, and they're seeking ways to match their profits with a way to help people, right? And I wonder, economically, how do you see that phenomenon economically? Is there a way to match the profit motive with the desire to genuinely help society? And why is this happening now and not decades ago?
Well, there are 2 points. A company only earns profit if it's helping society. Let's get that clear. If you're a company, if you're a restaurant and you serve bad food, you're not doing society any good. If you serve good food, you're doing society good. So that's the first point. The profit motive isn't against social benefit. But the other point is that, as I said before, if the GLBTQ people are competent, then a sensible employer will want to employ them. And indeed, in many sorts of companies, especially maybe in a factory, maybe it doesn't matter, although I'm not even so sure of that. But in some kinds of enterprises, advertising companies, law firms. I spoke to a law firm in Sao Paulo the last time I was there, and they were very interested. They wanted this diversity. This is a big, powerful firm of lawyers. They wanted all the talent they could get. And you can't say, look, I'm not going to employ Jews. That's the old way of doing it. Not going to employ Jews. Well, then you miss out on the talents that the Jewish people have. Or I'm not going to employ black people, which is a big problem in your country and in mine. Because they're not smart. And that, of course, is nonsense. They are. So a liberal society, a society of respected adults, permitted to make associations and make deals and trade, and as you were saying, have a go. That's what the English say, not the Americans. Have a go, innovate. That kind of society is encouraged by diversity.
Sure.
So I think it's a good business plan, and very interestingly, in most countries, private enterprise is way ahead of the government in encouraging real diversity. If you have a dynamic economy, lots of people get drawn in to the workforce or the inventive force.
And maybe diversity is important economically.
It is. It's important economically because, look, suppose you're doing the 100-meter dash, as we call it in English, right? For the Olympics in Rio, 100-meter dash. So you have to do it very fast, run fast. If you put a bag of cement on your back, you're going to be slower, aren't you? If you have to carry yourself in the cement, you're going to be slower, even if you're a world-class athlete. But that's what you do when you restrict, when you don't allow permission, when you try to protect one group of people by hurting or taxing another group of people. So it's good business to be open, to be liberal, to hear all different points of view. I mean, after all, conversation such as we're having now is creative. Look, think of a husband and wife, or two people who are married in a long-term relationship. The more they talk, the more they understand each other, the more their given diversity works for the benefit of the couple.
Free conversation. And also there's this human aspect to economics. Something I wanted to say to you is that I have seen two lines from you that have impacted me deeply, because they sort of have a poetic sense, and this is not something that you usually see from an economist. And it's really gratifying to see that. The first one is when you say that your transition as a trans woman has brought you closer to your own soul. You said that in an interview here in Brazil to Global News.
Closer.
And the second one is when you say that love, quote, love is crucial for scientific advance,
yes,
unquote, which you said in an interview for the Institute for New Economic Thinking. And it got me thinking, wow, you talk so much about how economics should be reformed into humanomics, right?
That's right.
To bring that more human aspect of it, and how we should pay attention as economists. We should pay more attention to how economists talk rather than what economists say. So why is humanity so important economically? And how do we bring that about within economics?
Well, it's not easy. I mean, he can result a very man and problem. When this issue comes up, when we're conversing among economists of, gee, there ought to be more women in the profession, I wait for a pause in the conversation and say, well, I did my part. All the men get very nervous and all the women laugh. But look, a creative person, that is perhaps an exaggeration. It's the case that we're happier if our persona, our outer appearance, is closer to our soul, to our insides. Now, I don't want to say that when I was a man, I felt this very strongly. I didn't. I wasn't a woman trapped in a man's body, as we often say. That's not how most trans people feel. When I was a guy, I was a guy and I felt like a guy. But I'm now more integrated, so to speak. My outside and my inside are closer together, and it's made me better at love. It's made me better at the cooperation that comes from love and the human sympathy, just human sympathy. I mean, to go back to Trump again, I wish I could forget him. One of the most striking contrasts between Trump and Biden is that Trump can't sympathize with people. And Biden, but by the way, like me, is also a stutterer. Although I don't think he's transgendered, is deeply, and has had these tragedies in his life, is deeply sympathetic with people. And how can that be bad for thinking about the economy? And you can think of 100 ways in which understanding people is important for understanding the economy, how the economy works or how it does not work. Now, of course, there are many things that my friends on the left ought to learn about economics, which they haven't. But still, at least my friends on the left often have a sympathy for ordinary people that some other economists on the right don't have. So, I think we should have the male and female principles, the I and the thou together in economics. And it's not, this all sounds kind of vague, right? But I can show you how it matters in detail.
I want to add an important, since you guys have moved from mostly economics per se into the human factor. I want to jump in and talk a little bit about the aspect, the importance of humanities and the cultural
Yes.
aspect of society into the development, the economic development of societies. So,
Yes.
since you wrote a little bit about it, but just making it short, what are the differences you would see into sort of the Renaissance economic scenario versus the cultural, and then what we see now? Do you think that economic development always thrives on a sort of vibrant cultural scenario? And then how do you see our current cultural scenario?
Well, I think that they can be substitutes for each other or complements, as we say in economics. But I think they're mainly, look, Soviet painting was terrible.
So is the economy.
That's right. Nazi novels were awful. There's a connection between good art and a free people. As far as the humanities are concerned, we call them that in English. I'm not quite sure if that's how you call it in Portuguese, but the fields that study the arts, the Department of Portuguese, the Department of English, the philosophy, history, and so forth, those also have a very important part in science, which is to do categories right. Before you measure, you have to know what the thing is that you're measuring. You're an astronomer. You want to count how many red giants there are for stars. Well, you have to have some idea of what that category means. How red does it have to be before it's a red giant or an orange giant or some other kind of giant, if you see what I mean? And that's true in all the sciences, social, physical, or about art. I think that liberty is liberty is liberty, and a free expression of gender or of whom you love, for example, the freedom of women against the old model where they were subordinated, the liberty of the individual worker to move from the Northeast to Rio or Sao Paulo to work. All those liberties also almost automatically make for vital art. Film in Brazil, for example, music in Brazil as an extreme case. So I don't know. I think there's a connection. Look, here's another way of looking at it. Ask yourself what the great ages of art have been: painting, music, and others. And, well, the obvious old one we think of is 5th century Athens. Well, Athens was a great commercial republic. It had a commercial empire as well as a military empire. Take a look at Quattrocento Florence, Firenze. Same story. Rich, banking, wool textiles and so forth, and also great art. Take a look at New York after the Second World War. This great economic engine in all kinds of fields, advertising being a famous one, was also a great creative center for American art of all kinds. So they go together.
Great. I want to get the question from the audience. Guys, we're not going to be able to ask all the questions that are being asked here, so we're just going to have to pick a little some of those. But just one from João Rios, which is: do you think that institutions can be somehow designed, or it purely reflects culture? What are the role of inclusive institutions in development?
Well, I think that the current theory at the World Bank is wrong. The World Bank says, following Douglas North and Daron Acemoglu, it says essentially add institutions and serve. So if you want a good legal system, give all the lawyers white wigs and robes, and then you'll have a good legal system. And I think it's as big a mistake as the old theory in the World Bank, which was add capital and stir. That all you had to do was to invest in a country, and then it would get rich. In Latin America, Raul Prebisch and others had another one of these theories: add tariffs and stir, right? And protect Brazilian manufacturing so you could do import substitution. And all these theories are silly. What you need are institutions or ideas, ethics, that gives people permission to be creative. And among the permissions is to love whom you want, and to be what gender you want, and to go into what profession you want, and to have those basic freedoms that go with adultism. So I think, look, how did the countries that are now rich become rich? It's not through capital accumulation, which people always think it is, and it's not through exploitation of the third world. That's another argument. No, it's through invention, innovation, new ways of doing things. Container ships, for example. Containers don't involve any new technology, right? They're just boxes, steel boxes. And a guy named Malcolm McLean in 1956 invented them. It wasn't fancy. He just invented them, and that's what made shipping so much cheaper. So that, for example, Brazil has a very lively trade with China through containerization. It's letting people try out things, having permission to try out things like Malcolm McLean. That's how you get rich. And that's a consequence of a free society. You can't get rich by coercing people. And that ought to be kind of obvious. You can't, use the fist and say, okay, you're going to invent something. And if you don't invent something, I'm going to beat you or put you in jail. This is crazy. Free people are creative. And there's no reason at all why Brazil couldn't have the kind of economic growth that India and China have had, both of which moved from highly controlled, highly planned, top-down, we, the intellectuals, we're going to tell you what to do, models for the economy, to letting people giving people permission. And the result was that a place like India now is growing at a real rate of about 7% per year per capita. In Brazil, you're lucky if it's 2%. There are two countries that I know a little bit about and love. South Africa, where I've taught, and Brazil. I mean, everyone loves Brazil, let's face up to it. But South Africa is not so lovable, but but Brazil is. Everyone loves Brazil. Those two countries drag along at 1 or 2% growth per year. 1 or 2% growth per year doesn't solve a lot of social problems. 7 to 10% does. And the way you get the 7 to 10% is not with government programs, not with protection, not with the kind of investment that Biden talked about about an hour ago. You get it through letting people have a go.
That's great answer. There are lots and lots of questions being sent to us. I'm just gonna pick two, which are very somehow repeated here. One is, how do we talk in a more sort of convincing way to the LGBT community, in the sense of how to approach them with liberal ideas in a way that they are more connected to it, as opposed to the more sort of left majority we see in Brazil?
Well, the problem is that in Brazil, liberal doesn't mean what it should mean. It means conservative. And that's true in Latin America generally. In the United States, it's kind of the opposite. Liberal means socialist. So there's something in the water of North and South America that's driving people crazy about this word liberal. But in Europe and in history, in the 19th century, liberal meant what I'm saying. Give people permission, treat people like adults, and obviously, treating people like adults includes their gender and affectional preferences. I mean, look, liberalism doesn't mean doing everything you want to do. You don't have a right in a true liberalism to blow COVID-19 virus up someone else's nose. You don't have the right in a true liberalism to drive 200 streets to hurt other people. That's not what being a free person means. You're allowed to deal with me all the way, I'll turn it sideways, all the way up to my nose. You can't punch me in the nose. Or you can't blow COVID up my nose either. So, and that's a very reasonable and adult and polite way of behaving with other people. And if we can get the queer community to understand that the government is not its friend. Now, in a way, oddly, this is only something I learned a few years ago. Oddly, this is a little tricky in Latin countries. Here's why. In the north, Germany, Holland, Britain, Sweden, the offshoots, like the United States or Australia, there was this 100-year reign of terror against male, especially male homosexuals. This didn't happen in Latin countries. What did happen in Latin countries, but didn't change, was that the church said that it did not approve of homosexuality, and that's still true. But the law in Latin countries, Spain and Italy and so forth, France, people weren't turned over to the police if they were gay, whereas in my country they were. So we in the North have I was going to say, in a way, in the South you have a special problem because you didn't ever jail people for homosexuality. Or is that not true in Brazil? Were people ever put in jail for being gay in Brazil?
There hasn't been a formal code prohibiting homosexuality. What has happened is that throughout the years, based on other, vague legal terms such as, I don't know, public decency or something like that, people were jailed. But it's not like the United States where...
Not like the United States.
Right, same-sex relations were actually criminalized.
They were indeed. And understand, this only went on for God, it was terrible. I have friends whose lives were ruined this way. This only went on for 100 years. Now it's over. But the market is the friend of the queer. Let's put it that way. That is, markets are places where you get to choose. You get to say, no, I don't like that dress. I want this other one. Whereas if you're in the old Soviet Union, you don't get to choose. This is the dress that everyone wears. So there's a kind of as my colleague and friend Milton Friedman said, you're free to choose in a market society. And it's hard to convince people of this because they think that they can go to the government and get relief. But that's the father and mother, that's the daddy and mama model. And we ought to convince people, it ought to be easy to convince queers of this, that daddy and mommy aren't their friends. I mean, many people come from families where their father has thrown them out of the house because they're gay. That's very common even in Brazil. And it's certainly common in my country. So what, you want some more daddies? You want governmental daddies with the power of the violence, the guns and the jails? Or a mama who wants you to be a nice boy and marry some nice girl and have grandchildren? No, you want to be free.
That's great. There are lots of comments and questions. Again, I'll make a special mention to Claudio Chiquida, which is an old friend and a very peculiar sense of humor. So he has said a few times, I will say it again, free market's the worst form of economic system, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. Yeah, he's
That's right. That's right.
But still, I would like to sort of publicly mention Claudio Chiquida has been a very close friend and a very sort of witty interlocutor. And now we'll come to a question by a person called Savio Coelho. He's asking, what is your opinion on new liberal radicals, people like Glenn Weil or people from charter cities like Paul Romer?
Well, charter cities are grand, and I wish they would happen. It's sort of, as long as they don't happen, we can dream about them and so on. But they haven't. They tried them in Honduras, and then for some reason it didn't work. They didn't get it passed, and so on and so forth. Glenn is very intelligent. He's from a great family. I'm almost sure he's got these cousins like not close cousins, but there's Herman Weil, who was a great mathematician, and Simone Weil, who was a great spiritual person. But we don't need anything new. I suppose that would be my main reaction. I'm an old person, so you can kind of expect me to say that. Look, all we need to do is have the kind of liberalism that's worked in the past, that's made more and more people free. After all, when Thomas Jefferson wrote those words, all men are created equal, he was a slave owner. And he didn't free his slaves ever, even after his death. He freed, and hear this, he freed his children among the slaves. Pay attention. This undoubtedly happened on a big scale in Brazil too. But gradually since 1776, more and more people in a country like Brazil or the United States or lots of other places have gotten free. This, I mentioned, this freedom of gay people is a novelty in the North. There is still a problem, by the way, in Brazil, while I have a Brazilian audience of liberals, is that people of African descent are still a small percentage of the high positions in Brazilian society. The last time I was in Brazil, I gave a talk to a big group of investors, I think they were. I don't know, there must have been 400 people in the room. And I said to them, I noticed that there are about 3 people of African descent in this room. And there's a problem there. But hey, I'm from the United States. I can hardly sneer at Brazilians for race relations.
Well, race is always a tricky issue here.
Yeah.
Well. But that's true. You hardly get. I can talk using my perspective inside the liberal movement. It's way easier to find Livres members who are from the LGBT movement or from, so let's say, other diversity groups than blacks. That's sort of the border that has never been really climbed. I'll ask you another question. There's a guy called Bernardo Seixas. He's asking if you have an opinion about current theories of cultural evolution, such as Joe Heinrichs and their relation to economics.
I'm not familiar with what he's talking about. Can you give me a brief explanation?
If you can give us on the comment box a brief explanation on what you mean, I'll jump into a next question, and then if we have some time, I'll come back to it later. That's fine. And then I'll come to a question by Gustavo Watts, who said that since you don't agree with the World Bank theory, what do you think should be the first step that countries such as Brazil and not India or China should take to improve our institutions?
Stop governing. Briefly. Stop licensing people. Stop tariffs. Stop planning. Stop all these attempts for the mama and the papa to tell people what to do. I was speaking to an audience in London a couple of years ago, and I was the kind of representative of the liberals, the true liberals. And I said to this audience, which I could tell was mainly on the left, I said, the reason there's a housing shortage in London, and it's really terrible, I mean, it's appalling, is what they call in England planning permission. We call it zoning in the United States. And it's really stupid. If you build a shack, a tool shed in the backyard, in England, you need to submit plans, and you need planning permission and so on. And of course, there's a shortage of housing. They're not building enough houses. So leave people alone is the main thing. Don't think that you can, well, let's see, let's give special subsidies to this kind of sugar plantation or this kind of airplane manufacturer. No, don't do it. Just let people try to please their customers. And if they please their customers, they make money, the customers are better off, and the economy will grow like mad. Because look, I know enough about Brazil, though I know hardly a word of Portuguese. Obrigada is all I know how to say. I know that it's a very creative country. I mean, any country that can produce Brazilian music obviously is filled with creative people. So you don't need to have mother and father in Brasilia, of all places, telling people what to do. Leave them alone.
I wanna go into an aspect of capitalism, which is intellectual property. First time I've been to Silicon Valley, all I heard was people talking about patents, and then we come to Brazil, nobody talks about patents. What's the importance of intellectual property, if there is some, in your opinion?
There is no importance to intellectual property. The phrase intellectual property sounds very liberal and libertarian, you might say. Gosh, we're in favor of private property, so surely we're in favor of private property in ideas. But that's wrong. It's a fallacy. I'm in favor of you having your house on your private property and you owning your house. I'm favoring, let's take a case that more people understand. I'm in favor of you owning your automobile, right? And you own it and you get to do whatever you want. If you want to drive it off a cliff, go ahead. If you want to burn it, feel free. But that's because I approve of that, because having a car has an opportunity cost. If the whole neighborhood can use your car, they all have keys, and anytime they want, they can take your car and drive it anywhere they want, then obviously that's not going to work very well. The car is going to be overused. No one's going to maintain it. It's going to be a real mess, as socialism so often is. But ideas don't have what we call in economics an opportunity cost. That is, if another person reads Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet, there's no less Hamlet to go around, right? So the correct price to read, for you to read Hamlet, should be 0. So I regard the whole discussion of intellectual property, and then this nonsense the United States says the Chinese are stealing it and so on. I want the Chinese to steal the intellectual property. I want Brazilians to steal intellectual property. I want Americans to steal Brazilian intellectual property. Take music again. No one has a patent over Brazilian style popular music, right? You don't have to pay any royalty to make up a tune with instrumentation or with song lyrics like a Brazilian popular song. It should be.
I have
free.
I think we should end this, but I have a couple of questions. I was very curious to know. I have read your criticism on Thomas Piketty's work, Capital of the 21st Century. Yeah. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that. And I have a very last question that's Very
Okay,
short.
don't tell me what the question is. Ask it, but we'll get to that in a moment. About Thomas Piketty, briefly, the obsession with equality, and I know it's a very big issue in Brazil and has been for a long time, is liable to cripple the real help for the poor of Brazil, which is economic growth. And how do I know this? Look, if you learn nothing from this hour we've had together, learn this. Economic growth since 1800 in a place like Brazil, the United States, France, wherever, Italy, has been on the order of an increase of 3,000%. The poorest people in Brazil, the very poor people in Brazil, are 30 times better off than their ancestors in 1800. That's a welfare program I can get behind. Whereas redistribution, taking away from the rich and giving to the poor, doesn't result in a 3,000% increase in the welfare of the poor. It may result in a 100% increase or 200% increase, but we're talking about 3,000% increase. So I think he's, as we have an expression from the south of the United States, barking up the wrong tree. The image is hunting squirrels with a pack of dogs. And by the time the dogs get to the tree, they think they saw the squirrel go up. The squirrel has gone to another tree. That's called barking up the wrong tree. And that's what he's doing.
The last question is, I have to ask this because I got really curious. You talk about Brazilian popular music. What's your favorite song or artist?
Well, I'm talking actually from hearsay. I'm not a big not that I don't like Brazilian music. Whenever I hear it, I think, boy, is that nice. But I'm not sophisticated about it. Ask me something about American jazz, and I can help you out. But I'm afraid. I was adjusting the argument to fit the audience. Not that it's wrong. I think most people agree that Brazil has been at least in the last 80 years has been extremely creative in popular music.
And it's got really curious.
So you can tell me who to go here.
If you want to talk about fusion between American sort of jazz and Brazilian music, you can always listen to the Sinatra Jobim encounters, which are amazing. Yeah,
that's interesting. You mean Frank Sinatra?
Yeah, Frank Sinatra and Tom Jobim singing together.
Is that so? What did you
Right. Yes. Yesterday I was listening to Elis Regina, and that's who I would recommend if you want.
Regina?
Elis Regina.
Oh yeah, Gino. Okay. I'll keep it in mind.
Lucas, why don't you send her some links on the email?
Sure.
Probably a good suggestion. We have to go towards the end of our wonderful conversation here. Lucas, do you want to make any final comments or any? I don't know.
I just want to thank you again. In my email to you, my first email, I wasn't really sure whether you'd respond, and I was really happy when you did. So
well, I try to respond to reasonable emails, and yours was very reasonable. So congratulations.
Thank you. And
I just wish I could actually be in Brazil, and maybe eventually we'll get all the jab, as the English say, and we can all start traveling again. I want to go back to the Northeast. I've been there once, but I want to go back because I want to buy more of those little folk statues. You know what I'm talking about? They come from the Northeast. They're unfired clay, and they're wonderful. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's those. I want to get more of those.
Yeah.
And I also want to hear some of this music you're talking about.
Yep. I will send you some suggestions.
Do please.
I hope this is the start of a conversation, because
Indeed.
we were all very excited to have you here.
Thank you, dear.
We're pretty much, fans of yours. You have been a
Good.
source of inspiration to our work.
Well, thank you. That's very good to hear. Okay, dear. Ciao, ciao.
Professor McCloskey, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I want to thank the McCloskey tutorial from Livres for organizing this conversation, and I want to thank you again for always being there for us. I mean, ever since I sent you the first email, I don't know, a few years ago, and I was like Lucas, not sure you would respond. And you always responded, and you have been so helpful to spread our ideas. So thank you very
Good.
much. Thank you for all of those who have been with us through this conversation. It will remain on YouTube, so feel free to recommend it, send the links to friends if you enjoyed it. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, dears.